Hello everyone, good afternoon. Welcome to Technical Root Tour. Today let us discuss about the access modifier. Today let us discuss about the access modifier. In the starting classes, when we're creating an syntax, I'm using an access modifier followed by return type. This access modifier is used to control the access of the members. It is used to control access of the members. This it is used to control the access. This access modifier will control the access from one class to another class. Which data has to be accessed from one class to another class means, and that time what kind of access modifier we have to use it down by you like that it is going to control. Now there are four types of access modifier. They are and public, private, protected, and default. So we have an high scope for an public. Okay, we are using an public mostly, followed by the public having an higher scope, followed by protected, and then it is followed by a default, and last is a private. Okay, the public is having a year scope. Okay, if you're using an access modifier as a public means we can access anywhere, right? We can access anywhere. If you're using an access modifier private means only declared class. Okay, only declared class we are going to access the data, not from the outside of the class. We can't be able to access the data if it is in private. Like that, this access modifier will be controlling the access of the members. These are the four access modifiers. Okay, let's see one by one. So let's start from the private. Okay, just having an list scope. Okay, just having a list scope. Okay, private access model. First one is a private. Okay, it is capable to an variables, methods, and an inner class, but not on the outer class. Okay, it is applicable to, it can be used for an variables, methods inside the class. Okay, with only inner classes, but not one sec, but not for outer classes, but not for an outer class. The scope of a private members in is within the declared class. Okay, the scope of the private members will be in only declared class. Write a scope also in the declared class. Only within the declared class. The scope where they're going to access the data only within the declared class. Okay. As like the first point, it is capable for, it is applicable for an variables and methods, right? We can use the private access modifier for the variables and the method. Let's see for how we are going to use it down for an variables or syntax for an variables. Okay. Syntax for private variables. The first one is in, so the syntax is in private, data type will be there, followed by a variable name, right? Is equals to date or value. This is in syntax of the private variable. For example, now private, the data type I'm going to use it on as an int, using a variable name is x, and value I'm going to give it. And this is in how we are going to use in private variables. Okay, private variables. This is how. Okay, it can applicable for variables. Now let's see for an method. This is a syntax of the variable. Now let's see for an methods. Syntax of method. Syntax of private methods. Right, syntax of private method, that is in private will be there. The private keyword, return type, and a method name, open and close it, parenthesis, open and close it, braces. This is a syntax of the private method. For example, now we are going to write it on mains. There will be in private. I'm going to return type as a void, method name as a fun method. No arguments. Okay, this is a syntax of the private method and this is a syntax of the private variables. This private access modifier is applicable for an variables and the methods only within the class. Within the class it is accessible, not from the outside of the class. For example, here I'm taking an class. The class name is an test class. I'm going to have some private variable, private int a is equals to 10. The same thing I have taken here. See, same thing I have written same. In the same way also I have written here, right? Syntax, right? Okay, I'm going to take one private method also. It's in the same class. See, this is a private variable. So private method means private void fun method. I'm going to say take a same method. I'm going to print some data. I'm printing an x value. If I'm going to print an x, sorry, x not a. If I'm going to print an a value, I'm going to get the data, but there should be a main method, right? But there should be a main method. Within the other class, I'm going to have some main method. I'll take this class name as a one class. Okay, this is one class. Let me have one more class, public class, test class, some main method. This is the main method. So I'm going to access the data. Okay, if I'm going to access the data, if I'm going to creating an object for this class, by creating an object only, right, we're going to access the data. I'm going to create an object for a one class and O is equals to new one. Mm. So one dot a. See, I'm going to access this private variable, but I'm getting an error because this is private variable only within this class, but we can't be able to access on the other class. By creating an object also, we can't be able to access the private variables or method. Within the declared class only, I'm going to access the data. Okay, within the declared class only, we are going to access data that can be used, this private variable that can't be accessed other class. Okay, let's have one more class within this class only. Public void yum. Okay, it's printing some data x. Okay, it's printing some data x, x a. Okay, and I'm also accessing the fun method. I'm also accessing the fun method. Now I'm going to run now also. I'm not getting any output. If I'm going to have o dot yum method, and that time I'm going to print the data. See, on that time, wait, error, it's showing error, it's showing error because of this line. See, now what output I'm going to get down, let's see. See, I got the output now because it is accessed within this class. From one method to other method we can access within the class only. We can't be able to access the outside of the class. Okay, the private methods can't be able to access the outside of the class. This private method I'm accessed within the same class, but in the other method I have accessed after that I'm creating an object and I'm going to access. Okay, after that I'm creating an object, I'm going to access, or else within the main method only I'm creating. Within the main method, see, within the main method, I'm creating a private variable also. I'm not getting a cut output. Okay, because of that error. Okay. invalid modifier. Invalid within the public method. I'm creating a private variable. It is not also accessible. Okay. You have to create an one more class. These private variables or methods only accessed only within the declared class, that can't be accessed the outside of the class. That can't be accessed outside of the class. Okay, only within the same class only we are going to access that data, but not from the outside of the class. Let's see and for a private method for overloading and overriding. Okay, I'm taking one class that has an, see, we can overload the private variables or private methods within the declared class only, not in the child class. Okay, we can overload the private methods only within the declared class. I'll write on that point. Private method overloading within the declared class. Within the declared class only we can overload the private method, but not from the outside of the class. For overriding, we can't be override the private methods. Okay, overriding, it is not possible. It is not. It is not possible to override. I'll write one point. That's it. It is not possible to override the private methods. Okay, it is not possible to override the private methods. But if you are overriding the private method forcefully, then it behave like an individual methods of the class. Okay, if you are also overriding, still you are overriding the private methods, it behaves like an individual methods, not a private method. It behave like an individual methods of the class. It is not any overriding. Okay, it is not possible to override the private methods. Only within the declared class we can overload. Okay, for example, this is one class. Okay, this is one class, then sample class. Within this class I am having some private methods. Okay, private void m method is there, and there is and one more method. One method overloading meant same method name but with different signature. Private void, same method name, integer x, but with different signature. See, we can overloading the private methods. Okay, we can overloading the private method within the same class. We are going to override with some other class, means class B extend sample. Now I'm going to override, means it can't be able to possible. Okay, same method name string. Yes, see, within the same class I can overload. Okay, but after that class means, it will be an individual method, not any it is not be an this overloading of these two methods. It is an individual method because it is an other class. Okay, it is an other class, it will be an individual method, not any overloading method. Only overloading is happening only in the within the declared class only, not from the outside of the class. We can overload the private method only within the declared class, not in the outside of the class. Let's see for an overriding. Okay, this is one class. I have a private void m method. I'm going to print some data. Print test. I'm going to override that method. I'm going to override that method. I'm going to print some data as a sample. See, if you are going to override the private method, it is not possible to override. If you are overriding this forcefully, means it will behave like an individual classes. Okay, individual methods of the class. It will behave like an individual methods of the classes. Okay, it behave like, let's write that point. If Forcefully they, if we are forceful, if override forcefully, they behave like individual methods of a class. That is not overriding. Okay, if you are still, if you're writing, if you are still trying to override the private method, means they will behave like an individual classes or individual methods of the classes, not any overriding. Okay, this is about the first access modifier, that is in private. Okay, this is the first access modifier, that is in private access modifier. This private access modifier is applicable for an variables and method only within the declared class, but not from the outside of the class. We can have an private variables and the methods, and we are going to access this outside of the class, but it can't be able to access. Only within the declared class we can access the data of the private access modifier. Let's see, the second one is a default access modifier, right? The second one is a default access modifier. This default access modifier is also applicable for an variables, methods, and classes. It is applicable for variables, methods, and class. Okay, it is applicable for a variables, methods, and the class. Let's see their scope. The scope of these default members will be an within the class, within the declared class, within the declared class, excuse me, in the declared class. From other class also we can access the data from other class, and from child class of the same package. All this happen in the same package. Okay, all these things will happen within the same package, of same package, not outside of the package. I already explained about the packages. We are going to access data from one package other package. This default will be applicable only within the same package. Okay, default is also called as an package private. Default is also called as a package private. Okay, this is also called as a package private. We can access the data of this default access modifier within the class or from the other class or a child class of the same package. Okay, within the same package, from where to where also we can access the data of the default access modifiers. Let's see one example for this default access modifier. Here is one class. I'm taking an example class. Let me take one more class A. Okay, this default is also applicable for an variables and methods, right? Let's see an syntaxes. I forgot to say syntaxes. Syntax for an variables and syntax for the syntax for variables, that is an default variables. Now access modifier. I'm writing a shortcut of access modifier as an access modifier data type followed by an variable name is equals to value. Okay, this is a syntax for an default access modifier for variables. For example, there won't be, we are not pure mentioning a default keyword, only we are going to use it. If you are using an int x is equals to 10, means that is a default. Default is an, it is having a default access modifier. Okay, this is a syntax of the variable for an default access modifier. For methods, let's see. For methods, syntax of methods. Syntax of methods. Access modifier, return type will be there, and a method name will be there. Within the parenthesis, open and close braces. For example, this is a syntax. For example, void yum. We are not, I told you that we are not mentioning a default, right? We are not mentioning any default, uh, the keyword. Only if you are not mentioning the, by understanding that it is a default only. We understand that it is a default. Okay, this is a syntax of the methods on the default methods and a default variable. Let's see one example. Here is one class. So I'm going to take some variable default. We are not mentioning a default world. Int x is equals to 20. Okay, this is an default variable. Okay, this is a default variable. It is applicable for a variable, and this is a default method. We're not mentioning any method public statement. It is a default. Okay, let's print that value. Print x. Printing of that value. Print x. Let me take one more method. Public void of print x and call that method. Okay, calling of that method. Within the same class means we don't have creating any object. We can access the data. Okay. Now I have already told you that we can access this default access modifier within the class, within the same class. I'm going to access this from other method. I'm going to access or an other class. Other class also we can access. This is an other class, right? This is one other class. Let me create an object for that class. Okay. A is equals to new A. Okay, let's print that data a dot x. We can access. Okay, a dot x or a dot. There is a method within the default access modifier a dot m, and one more method is that a dot f. So we can access within the declared class. Within the same class, I'm going to access this private variables and private message. This is within the same declared class or of the other class. Within the other class, by creating an object and also access or an child class. Class A extends, sorry, class B, it's not class C. Class B extends A. Now I can access the data, right? And now I can access the data. I'm taking one more method. Public volume 2. Okay. Now I'm going to access the data of X. Sorry. And I can access an M method. See, I'm going to access the default variables and default methods from the child class. From the child class, I can access. It is getting error. B is already declared and I'm going to get D. Okay. Like this, we can access the default access variables and methods from the within the same class. Within the same class, I have access. See, within the same class of the other method I have accessed or a child class. Child class. See, this is D is a child of the A. D is a child of the from the child class also accessed or an other class. Other class by creating an object also we can access. Let's print now. If I'm going to print and I'm not getting any outputs, I'll get out. I'm not getting any error. I'm getting an output, right? I'm getting an output. This is an about the default access modifier and a private access modifier. We are done with the today with the private and a default. The tomorrow's class, let's learn about the remaining two, that is unprotected and a private. Okay, the private access modifier means we can access only within the declared class, right? Within the declared class. See, within this class, I am accessing the data, right? I am accessing this private variable and a private method within the declared class of the other method, right? Within the declared class of the other method, I'm not accessing of the other class. I'm not able to access from the other class, right? I'm not able to access from the other class within the declared class. To the declared within the same class only I'm accessing, but it is an other method. You can access from the other method within the same class, but it should be within the same class of okay. But other methods also can be accessed, but within the same class. And this default access method can be accessed within the same class or a child class. Child class also have access to see. I'm accessing the default variable x and a default method m, and I'm accessing the default variable x and a default method m by the other class by creating an object. Okay, by creating an object, because this default method is also an instance method, will come in instance method only. So it is a, you can access the from the other class of the within the same package, within one package only I'm doing all this. I'm not accessing from the outside of the package. Did I am accessing from the other packages? No, I'm not accessing any from the other package. Within the same package only I'm accessing the data, right? Within the same package only we can access the default access modifier from where to where also. Okay, this is about the default and the private access modifier. So thank you. With tomorrow, let's learn about the protected and the private access modifiers.